My parents and their whole generation will always remember where they were on July 29th, 1969, when Neil Armstrong first set foot on the moon. It's a moment that is permanently etched in their memories. Now, as exciting as it was for their generation that day, our generation is finally preparing to surpass that moment. Almost 50 years later, the moon remains the only celestial body we've ever set foot on, but NASA has plans to change that. Going to Mars is now a very real goal. While it may not be easy, it will definitely be worth it. Now, you may ask, why is it worth going to Mars? There are many reasons. Chief among them is that it is human nature. We are a species of explorers and adventurers, and this is the greatest adventure ever conceived. We're also very curious by nature, and while we've known about Mars for thousands of years, only now do we have the capabilities of actually going there. The project will also bring a number of economic benefits. There are already thousands of high-tech jobs tied to this project, and anytime hundreds of billions of dollars are being spent on scientific research, other industries will benefit. Medical technology will become more precise, fabrics will become higher performance, and cell phones will become even more useful. The mission is also an opportunity to perform important scientific research. Our probes have already shown that there was water on Mars. If we could send geologists there, they could determine what happened to it, and they could also look for microbial fossils, which, if found, would finally prove that there is, or at least was, life on other planets. We could further study those fossils and determine if they're comprised of the same stuff, namely DNA, that we are, or if they were something entirely different. Another advantage to a 3-year space voyage is that it could lead to some exciting new recycling technologies. NASA is already developing a 3D printer that could melt unnecessary items and rebuild them into more critical tools. Now, while there are many good reasons to go to space, the mission itself will be extremely difficult, and NASA knows they still have a number of obstacles to overcome. Chief among them is that a fully loaded Orion spaceship would be too heavy to launch, but NASA is considering some brilliant solutions to this problem. It might actually be more feasible to build Orion in space, like we did with the International Space Station. Unfortunately, it would take over 80 Atlas V launches to get all the necessary components into space, which is one of the main reasons it took over a decade to build the ISS. To solve this, NASA has developed the Space Launch System, or SLS, which, coupled with the RS-25 engine, would provide more than 2 million pounds of thrust, which is almost 10% more powerful than the rockets that took us to the moon. This heavy-lifting rocket could get the components to space in just 8 trips. Another option is to send the cargo to Mars before the astronauts. The cargo wouldn't have to travel nearly as quickly and could use solar energy along with ion propulsion to make the journey. And once it's there, it could be put into Martian orbit to await the astronauts. But the next problem's a little trickier. No matter how much weight they cut, there's no way they can carry enough fuel for a return trip. Enter the in situ resource utilization system, which would allow astronauts to produce their own fuel on Mars, either by converting carbon dioxide into methane, or if we found water and could extract it from the soil, we could break that down into hydrogen and oxygen and use either of those as rocket fuel. While NASA still has these and other hurdles to overcome, they feel confident enough in their solutions that they have already developed a 3-stage plan to get us to Mars. The first stage is termed Earth Reliant and would consist of experiments performed aboard the ISS. Here they could study the astronauts' health and performance and how it would be affected by a long-duration mission. They could also study the developing technologies, such as the Bigelow Expandable Activity Module, or BEAM. This inflatable technology weighs a fraction of current airlocks and occupies almost no cargo space, but it would actually allow 3 astronauts to spacewalk simultaneously, where the airlock on the ISS can only accommodate 2. The next stage is what NASA would call the Proving Ground. Here, astronauts are going to be launched into a high orbit around the moon, where they will attempt to land on an orbiting asteroid. This phase not only allows them to test the skills necessary for a Martian landing, it allows them to test the reliability of their equipment in an environment where they cannot be evacuated and where it would take between 10 and 100 days for a resupply. NASA hopes to have this phase done by the year 2025. The final phase is what they call Earth independent. Once the equipment and crew have proven reliable, they will be sent on a 1.5 to 3 year mission to Mars, or to the near Mars region of space anyway, where they will most likely enter into orbit around Mars and possibly even land on Phobos, one of the Martian moons. From there, NASA believes we can set foot on Mars sometime in the 2030s. It's an incredible thing to even imagine. There are still a lot of challenges to overcome, but NASA is tackling all of them head on. We're on the brink of becoming an interplanetary species. If we achieve this, it will be the greatest moment in human history, and believe me, it will be a moment that none of us will ever forget.